Team Liquid had been synonymous with North American CS since entering the scene in 2015, hosting many a legend in their time. Whilst being no strangers to the international talent on occasion, Liquid's identity has been strongly rooted in Canada and the US for so long that it felt like that would never change. However, with the shift of the Tier 1 space giving rise to a thriving European scene at all levels, North America just stagnated. This was not helped by the release of competing FPS Valorant stealing most of the region's talent and organizations. Two names stood out to carry the torch of NACS in the scene's darkest times, but even regular rival Cloud9 transitioned to a European project before settling in the CIS scene permanently. Liquid may have stood as the last one standing, but even the most valiant of efforts must crack under the pressure of lacking results in the highest level. And during the summer's player break, Liquid finally looked across the Atlantic and changed their identity after 8 long years. It's a big business risk for Liquid. The change will take away NA's most prolific major legend spot for Copenhagen 2024, as Liquid will need to compete among the incredibly deep EU scene. Plus, with there being less and less prominence in CSGO and CS2, it's not clear whether North American fans will continue to support Liquid in the near future. And they're not banking this risk on established stars for tournament performances or even well-known and popular players to bring in new fans. It's two guys that have grinded hard over the past 5 to 6 years to earn an opportunity at the highest level. Patsy you may already know. Having been within Spirit's academy system since 2019, his promotion to the main squad in 2021 saw him ride with them to the Tier 1 environment. But it's the second player that intrigues me more. Rainwaker has never been in the Tier 1 scene for longer than an event here or there, but as part of his national Bulgarian infrastructure, he's torn up the Tier 2 space both domestically and internationally. Whether he can go further is a question for the future, but the answer we seek may lie in the past. Rainwaker is a young Bulgarian rifler whose professional career started back in 2017. Cited as taking inspiration from Prime Astralis in the years that followed, he started playing for a local organisation named Headshot BG. The majority of Headshot's efforts at the time was playing in the ESL Southeast Europe Championship, a now discontinued branch of the ESL National Championships that served countries like Romania, Greece, Hungary and Bulgaria, among others. Whilst moderately successful in the region, Headshot BG didn't get enough time to make any major splash in the international space, and the team didn't stay together for long. As a result, Rainwaker would bounce around from place to place that following year, establishing himself among the Bulgarian scene and landing a place on Fate. For 9 months, Fate would find success domestically in the ESL SEE and other independent competitions. As well as that, the team would spend a fair amount of time attempting international events, coming top 16 in an advanced season and trying to qualify for the minor and Tier 2 cups of the time. Sadly for Fate, they wouldn't make the leap that they had hoped for, with their best showing being a top 8 in the second division of the Winners' League. However, around this time, people in the national scene began to take notice of Rainwaker, being awarded the Best Young Player in the Esports Bulgaria Awards, an award ceremony for the region where fans and pros alike had a say in the recipients. Forging a new path with fellow upstarts, Rainwaker received all the hype one can get from a domestic scene, but internationally things could have been better. His downfall would be individual consistency, with performances varying from event to event, the most defined being the few international appearances he would gain. With failure to capture the title at the A1 League finals in September of that year, Fate's momentum had all but petered out, and Rainwaker would not stick around to rectify this loss. Instead, he was about to turn an important chapter in his career. The team that beat Fate at the aforementioned A1 finals went by the name of B-Pro, and despite being the de facto best team in the region, their contracts with the organisation were running out, and they were looking for better offers. With established IGL Rocking leading the charge and similarly sick prospects like Denny Slaw and Rafdu on the roster, the core were prime signing targets in the region. Meanwhile, Norwegian organisation Skade were T-minus to liftoff behind the scenes, and made an offer for 4 of the players from ex-B-Pro to found their Counter-Strike roster. Opting to seek roster strength as well, their 5th player would be a man that stood against them only a few weeks earlier. Rainwaker was acquired by Skade and had similar aims and high potential to succeed in going global, and over a 3-year tenure with the team, he would achieve them. The rest of 2019 would still see the makings of Rainwaker's consistency, alongside a rifle-AWP combo that would blossom for Skade's entire run. Denny Slaw, who played with Rainwaker during the Headshot BG days, had been given the opportunity to build upon that previous relationship. Together they would find themselves at the top of the board multiple times over as the 2 standout elements of any iteration of the squad. But for the time being, that potential was just potential. Results wouldn't follow suit immediately, but once again the domestic and Tier 3 competitions yielded good placings and several titles by the end of the year. 2020 brought with it the online era, a period of time where all competition at all tiers moved to the online environment due to the outbreak of COVID-19. The Tier 2 landscape benefited from this, where cups allowed new rising talents to cut their teeth and at times get a crack at the top level teams. Multiple squads made their names, and Skade were among those that built their reputation. Far from being a rising contender, they continued raking in the Tier 3 trophies and made moves up to higher level competitions like the Premier Division of ESCA's Mountain Dew League, as well as Grid and Relog's Home Sweet Home and 9-5 Cups. Whilst not coming in as winners of these events, nor even finalist contenders, their ability to re-earn their spots in these tournaments kept them within the periphery of the Tier 2 scene. Meanwhile, individually, Rainwaker's consistency issues had finally given in, bringing in the impact numbers without many major dips in form. But Skade were destined for bigger things. They looked to further strengthen their roster going into 2021, bringing in ships to bolster their previous additions in Duplicate and Oxygen the previous year. The caveat was the departure of IGL Spellin, meaning further reliance on Rainwaker more than ever, as he took over IGL duties for the time being. Whilst he would relinquish captaincy to new signing Ships and Bubble in the months that followed, the chopping and changing of tactical styles negatively impacted his performances, and he struggled to maintain the consistency that he worked to build in the year prior. When he was on though, this team was on. Skade continued participating in the same events and circuits of the previous year, but now earning some of the championships that they were passed over before. Beginning with the Elisa Invitational Spring, a tournament series that they'd go on to do consistently well in, Skade would take 4 prolific titles in the Tier 2 online scene and a further 3 grand finals in that year. Successes that led to a period of time that I like to call the Bulgarian CS War. Skade were making steady headway in improving themselves, bleeding into a summer of success even with their consistency issues. They were unchallenged the best Bulgarian team for a while, leaving the domestic competition behind and showing up the scene on an international stage. However, in the background, a rivalry was brimming at the domestic level. An August team by the name of Mbappe, Ships' former squad, began to seriously challenge Skade and were making moves up the domestic circuit. Their threat grew when they signed North American organisation Team Fiend and immediately set about testing Skade and Rainwaker, popping up in the same competitions both locally and internationally and racking up a back and forth set of head-to-heads over that year. The experienced roster that made up Fiend had the one-up over Skade, but only by a single map or best of 3. And matches were frequently close and rarely boring. Having commentated on some of these games myself, I'd recommend watching them back if you can track down the VODs. They truly brought out the best in Rainwaker, who, once relieved from his IGL status, put his best foot forward time after time to win a rivalry that can make a top Tier 2 team. He would step up individually, becoming the team's clutch master throughout this year and next, but the conversation of which team was better came down to one thing. Fiend were consistently good, and Skade were occasionally great. And nothing showed that more than when the rivalry came to a head at the IEM Full RMR that year. With both teams bouncing off the walls in the run-up to the Stockholm Major, they would meet in the group stage. While Skade would take the match, only Fiend made it out of the group stage, whereas Skade couldn't get a required 3rd win to progress, and so in the most important tournament of their run, Fiend would be the team that came out on top overall. They would go on to the playoffs with a serious chance of making it to the Stockholm Major, getting within 1 match of doing so, but that's a story for another day. They would end their rivalry with 1 more Elisa Invitational win, beating Skade in the playoff first round and going on to win the tournament. Fiend wouldn't outlive 2021, but Skade did, now armed with a Rainwaker who transitioned his online success into proven land talent at the RMR. But despite fully dispatching of his consistency problems, Skade's 2022 was a lot more of the same. Most of their tournaments were unremarkable, but then they'd come out of nowhere and secure a good top 4 or tournament win before going back to struggling in the next event. To reiterate, it was excellence, but on occasion. By September, the organisation were no longer interested in supporting the squad, parting ways never to return to CSGO. The now ex-Skade players would stay together in some capacity, with veteran elements Bubble and Dreamer moving on to do different things. Rainwaker, meanwhile, had never been better. The trophy cabinet was looking pretty scarce, but life after and at the tail end of Skade showed some of his highest tournament ratings of all time. Leading the charge for what remained, ex-Skade would continue to play within the Tier 2 scene whilst in search of a brand new home. And that would be far closer than one might think. Much like Skade, a new organisation associated with the online casino Casino 500 were interested in getting involved in Counter-Strike, and decided to bring on the core of ex-Skade. Denny, Ships and Rainwaker would be joined by B-Pro and Fate alumni to create the ultimate Bulgarian super squad. 500 would immediately be thrust into the forefront of Tier 2 competition, having received an invite to the Elisa Masters Expo through the core's success in Elisa tournaments in the past. Being a brand new team with low expectations, Rainwaker would seek the opportunity to build upon his previous LAN outing 1 year ago. Whilst not the top performer, combining similar performances with Ships led 500 to the arena playoffs. Quarter-finalists would be as far as they would go, but even the 2-0 loss against Big left a lot of intrigue to the team, even though it was intrigue that wouldn't remain. Once again, 500 would carry almost none of their momentum into 2023, with the occasional win or deep run to show that they still had it if the circumstances were right. They were fully locked into this curse of inconsistently great, and now unable to crack the glass ceiling, falling apart in a disappointing Paris RMR. 500 would try to turn a corner with the roster strength in other areas, and Rainwaker's performance now better than ever. With high ratings on the consistency he needed, he'd established himself as a cornerstone of 500, a player that they could rely on in the worst of times, until they couldn't. In a sea of wild off-season roster changes, Rainwaker would finally get the opportunity to leave his domestic scene and go abroad with Team Liquid. It's often said that players who tear up the Tier 2 deserve a chance at Tier 1, and nobody fits the bill quite like Rainwaker. He didn't break out in recent tournament performances like a lot of the players that people are currently talking about. He's been a sick element for his squads for the better part of 3 years, with his game only improving over time. Joining an exclusive list of players before him, Rainwaker gets the unique opportunity to break out of the Bulgarian scene and prove himself on the world stage. Whether he can do so is still up for debate, however. Recent form suggests optimism in my eyes, but walking back down memory lane, it's clear that sometimes his consistency may well come down to the environment around him. It will be on Liquid to provide the platform he needs to succeed, and in turn we could see a star in the making. For now, the position he finds himself in upsets many a status quo. Obviously the transition away from NA for Liquid, but further from that, this will be the first time Rainwaker finds himself in an international roster. This will also be the first time in 4 years that he's without Denny, a partnership that had helped make the teams that they were part of. It truly is the end of an era in many regards. But for every end there's a new beginning, and we'll all be watching to see how the middle and end plays out.